now it just seems again and again the EU regulation is just in friction and combat with big tech here in the United States.
This is just the latest, Caroline. It's been a pretty steady stream of combative, back and forth between Meta and regulators in the EU. Obviously, the latest, as you mentioned, has to do with targeting of political ads. Meta, there is new regulation, I believe it's coming online in October, that makes it very difficult to target without getting very direct data source from the user themselves with permission to target them with political ads. And Meta has obviously decided the juice is not worth the squeeze here in that regard. And so they're going to just get rid of that business entirely.
Well, I'd like to ask a little bit more about that. There's more than 450 million people in the European Union. So on paper, it's a big market. But I think that Meta, and specifically the CFO, Susan Lee, have talked about how generally political advertising isn't that material or a contributor to revenue anyway.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. At the beginning of last year, so at the beginning of 2024, as we were heading into the U.S. election cycle, Susan Lee, the CFO of Meta, was asked on an earnings call about, the political ad business. She basically said it's not material. I believe in 2020, it wasn't even in the top 10 categories in terms of advertising spend on Meta's various platforms. So you can see why they're willing to walk away here from that business, because it does not, it is not a material revenue growth driver for them anyways.
What it all sets us up for, Kurt, is also seeing how Alphabet, I think Google had already pulled away in terms of their focus on political ads. But when we're thinking in the context of the AI action plan in the US and what that means for EU regulation and trying to lead the charge, it really feels as though the US is just walking away from the EU in many ways, like they have done with their generative AI offerings in the EU as well when it comes to Meta.
That's right. I think we're seeing, two very different paths between regulators in the US, regulators in the EU. As you mentioned, Caroline, at the beginning of this conversation, constantly in combative mode with EU regulators. Meta is not so much here in the US. Obviously, they are still dealing with antitrust related stuff and the FTC and all of that, but generally a much more friendly regulatory environment in the US, a lot of self-regulation from these tech companies. Europe is not really taking that same stance, and it feels like it's getting wider and more dramatically different, by the month here.